insightful. And we'd also like you to provide us your feedback at the end of the Auxin so that we know where we should focus on for improvement. Also, we are going to record the session, right? That is so that if we have a resource for afterwards, that we will put it on our CTL website, and you can then go and have a listen to it in your own time as well. So just to touch on the order of proceedings for this afternoon, we'll have a very exciting presentation by my two colleagues. They are ready for us, followed by a Q&A session, and I would like to invite you to make note of your questions as we go along and then post it in the chat so that we can address it in the Q&A session, and then some will bring the session to a close for us. Right, so for starters, let me introduce you to the members of this focused interest group on decolonisation. We have my colleague, Ntwasa. He is from the Centre for Teaching and Learning. Then we have Gerda on my left-hand side. We have Gerda Dullart from the Faculty of Medicine and Health Sciences. We have Jean Feldman, ex-CTL. She's now at the Transformation Office. And then myself, Anthea, I'm also from the Centre for Teaching and Learning. And I am deliberately leaving Ruenda and Jerome for last because they will be the stars of the show this afternoon. They will be our two presenters, and they will be presenting on the challenges of transforming curricula, reflections by an interdisciplinary community of practice. And also just to mention that the unpacking of this paper that they will be doing, it was recently published in the Transformation in Higher Education journal. So well done for this publication to the group as well. So Ruenda is from the Sustainable Development Institute, and Jerome is from the Faculty of Education. And without much further ado, I think I've said enough. I'm going to hand over to Ruenda. She's going to start first, and then Jerome will follow. Over to you.
Thanks, Anthea. Good afternoon, colleagues. It's very weird to be staring at the camera and having big bad brother flashback moments. But at least my colleagues are in the room, so I feel safe. My name is Ruenda. I am at the School of Public Leadership, and it's really an honor to represent our community of practice this afternoon. We've been getting together since 2020 to wrestle with decolonisation and transformation at Stellenbosch University. So my job today is just to give you a picture of the context within which we operated and our ways of working, and then I'm going to hand over to Jerome for the meat of the session, to talk through some of the key points we visited in the 4-year journey we've been on and the lessons we've learned. So we recently presented some of our work at the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning meeting with the University of Bath, and it was quite challenging to explain the unique historical burden of Stellenbosch University in one sentence. And today I don't want to preach to the choir, but I think it's always important to acknowledge that Stellenbosch University is obviously inextricably linked to our apartheid's history, and therefore the reality that we face at the moment in our country in terms of racism and exclusion. We just can't get away from that. And the university is wrestling with what transformation then means, given its historical contribution as well. So on the left-hand side of the slide is a non-exhaustive list of recent policies and plans and reports that have come about. Interesting sometimes that they seem to be quite reactive in terms of events that happen in our country and our local environment. And so it's in the midst of all of these policies and plans and incidents that our little community of practice was formed in 2020 during the COVID year. And this is the landscape that has really shaped our conversations. None of our conversations happen in a vacuum. So we are very aware of the policy reforms that are happening, and then the incidents that remind us that we are still very far from being a transformed place of teaching and learning. So we often referred back to the student-led protests in 2015 to 2017, which was really a big energizer in terms of the conversations of decolonisation in higher education in South Africa. And then, you know, the race-based article that came out from Stellenbosch University. And then, unfortunately, something that really rocked us as a community was obviously the student-on-student race-based violence that happened recently. So, although the university is busy with reforms and we have formidable transformation apparatus, our Black staff and students really struggle with that disconnect between transformation on paper and their lived experience at the university. And something that we reflected on quite often as a group is that culture will eat policy for breakfast. So that's really what brought us together, and I think keeps us together, is the question of what do we actually do then to decolonize and transform this space. And I think we keep coming back to the need of practical examples and tangible things that we can do and take into our environment. So we hope to share some of that with you today. Just a little bit about us. We are an interdisciplinary community of practice, so we represent all the roles at the university, from academics to professional, administrative and support staff. We represent different faculties, academic disciplines. I don't know if you can see how clear is the resolution on the camera, but we also span quite an age range, with Sim being the youngest. And I think the core group has kind of stuck together since 2020, but we've had new members join, we've had some members leave, and we really just try and stay inclusive and flexible as a group. And we actually started at an Auxin in 2020 in an online meeting like today. We were talking about powerful knowledge and decolonising the curriculum, and a group of us just felt the need for a longer and deeper engagement, and that's what we've been doing for 4 years. So we meet online, we meet in person when we can, we go on writing retreats, we eat together when we can. We present our work and our thoughts at conferences and platforms like today. We have written together in shared documents with lots and lots of comments and track changes. And we've actually managed to publish our work, which was, it was really great that we managed to do that. And I think maybe what is the most important part for me is how we've worked together over 4 years through a process of storytelling and reflection. Storytelling and reflection has been really important because it allows us to carry the mental and emotional burden of this kind of work. And through storytelling and reflection, we're able to acknowledge the pain in the process of doing this. So we haven't always seen eye to eye. We have had some very heated conversations at times. We're very fortunate in that we have skilled facilitators in the group that can also hold space when difficult things come up. And I think the important part that I take from the time we've spent together is learning how to sit in discomfort. So even when we don't necessarily agree, we've built the muscle to sit together in that discomfort because our shared belief that transformation is incredibly important and needed is bigger than that initial discomfort. And we can be uncomfortable together until the ideas settle. And I think that's what's allowed us to really become a community. So we support each other inside our very focused work, but just as colleagues in general. We share challenging ideas and help each other make sense of what these things mean in our contexts. And I think maybe the most important thing for me is that we keep hope alive for each other when the things we see in our immediate environment don't necessarily make us think that transformation is happening. So thank you for that, colleagues. So now I hand over to Jerome to take you through some of our key learnings.
Thank you, colleagues, and thank you, Ruenda. My name is Jerome from Education Policy Studies. Those who joined us earlier could see how I just blessed myself with the water, and we will hopefully link to some of that today. So we see, as a group, we see decolonization as a shared quest. As a group, we realize that decolonization is necessary, but it's often not well understood. Even in our own group, we didn't have a shared understanding or a way to express decoloniality. Our understandings of decolonization is not a taking away of what is white and European and Western and replacing that with what is Black and African. Nor is it a doing away with powerful knowledge and putting in place of it everyday knowledge. That's not our understanding. Instead, we have a pluriversalist approach. In other words, we view powerful knowledge in relation to everyday knowledge in balance. And so there's room for these knowledge forms to coexist. And so we see decolonization as a process and definitely not as a destination. Our search for answers drew us from our ivory towers in the academia into the woods of Ubuntu pedagogy. And as you might know, Ubuntu pedagogy is an educational philosophy that draws on the African concept of Ubuntu, we are who we are through others, and it focuses on aspects such as interconnectedness, interdependence, humaneness, and conversation. And some of the tenets of Ubuntu pedagogy include, and it's not limited to, of course, sharing, belonging, participation, conversation, and deliberation. And so we share with you, and of course, ours is very limited, but we'd like to share with you what we applied in different spheres, different environments in our classes, and the possible or the effects thereof. And of course, this list is just a few examples. So I've categorized some of the examples into three categories. The first category is promoting collaboration, diversity, and inclusion. And here we have examples of, for example, the national language policy advocates for trans-languaging. And the effect, or the hopeful effect of that, is that it encourages collaboration, especially with previously marginalized groups. We have examples in our community of practice of intentional interracial and class grouping of students when they did group work. And it goes beyond just sorting black and white students together. And the impact or the effect that we've seen is that this kind of purposeful engagement and purposeful intentional practice encourage diversity and inclusivity. Another example is using open memos. And the idea and what we found was that these open memos encourages or enhances inclusion of previously unheard voices. The open memo allows for different kinds of answers instead of focusing on one set answer. A second grouping is that of broadening knowledge. And here we also we shared two examples with you. One of our colleagues in oenology used or drew from students IKS, the indigenous knowledge systems, where she included the use of impepo, a fragrance, into the curriculum. And the effect of this was that through that, students' social and cultural frameworks were recognized. And for those people who fear that decolonization is a dumbing down of content and information, this actually led to a broadening of knowledge and inclusion of variety. So we benefit from including other ways of seeing, of being in the world, of knowing. Another example is what I call correcting disciplines, where one of our colleagues in the university included in one of the EDP, extended degree programs, invited African scholars to the program, and this resulted in students' perspectives being broadened. Another group that we want to share is active learning approaches, and so Ruenda, for example, used, instead of focusing on lecturing the content, she actually actively worked with the students in what she called the Soil Enhanced Project. And the impact of that was, again, broadening students' perspectives and also collaborating with your students instead of simply doing the lecturing. Another example is student-designed assessments, where the impact was that it enabled lecturers and students to, again, interact, work together. And in this case, the students definitely felt that they are heard and that they are included in the curricular process. Then in our community of practice itself, the ubuntu becoming process, the notion of we are who we are through others, resulted in us or enabled us to sit in our discomfort, in our awkwardness, to be able to disagree and agree to disagree, to implement attentiveness to otherness, and it also facilitated our own learning across barriers, multiple barriers. Then, if Ubuntu pedagogy gave us ways of being or becoming, then Fraser's social justice theory with its three tenets gave us a language to use in our curriculum practices. So to effect, in Fraser's words, to effect parity of participation, to allow equal participation in the pedagogical process, Fraser, of course, suggests three R's. One, recognition, which means allowing difference, redistribution, in other words, making the resources to participate in the learning process available to everyone, and then representation, in other words, including and being cognizant of diversity, different ways of thinking, different ways of learning, different histories, different outlooks on the world. So while the university is good at the recognition part, in other words, it does allow Black students, for example, access to the university in weird and wonderful ways, it still lacks, in our view, the redistribution and the representation part, because recognition alone doesn't necessarily equate to representation and redistribution. Just like access to the university doesn't automatically mean epistemic access, and that is one of the big issues. So this, of course, these three application of the three R's requires work. It requires work from lecturers, academics, and we in our processes talked about, deliberated about the ways in how we could apply this and use this language in our classrooms. And so in terms of recognition, examples that we could think about was peer assessment, enabling assessment choices, allowing diverse answers rather than one correct answer. And the impact of this we found enhanced inclusion, and again, the big thing, epistemic access. In terms of redistribution, we made the reading materials available for all our students, bringing the resources to the classroom, telling them where to find the information as opposed to saying, go and research it. And thus we found enabled more equal, more equitable access and participation. In terms of representation, this was about inclusion of students' cultural and social dimensions, like we've mentioned with the example of Impepo, to include students' social and cultural dimensions makes them feel included, their voices get heard, the access to knowledge is broadened, and the knowledge pool in itself about the topic is broadened. And in that way, this decolonization process through the use of Ubuntu pedagogy and Fraser's dimensions helped us to understand not only what the students feel, but also it gave us a moment of reflection on our own biases, our power distributions, our own blind spots, etc. So it was in a way also a reflective tool on our own practices. A few examples that we found through this process that was our conversations, we found practical steps that people can consider to decolonize the curricula and assessment practices. For example, interpreting and translanguaging, I've mentioned the examples in previous slides. I've referred to Impepo, etc., as a way of including or drawing from students' social and cultural dimensions, and so on. What we have learned through this process is that having interdisciplinary conversations and a community with which to engage is crucial. We can't go at it alone. I'm reminded about this saying that if you want to go far, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And our deliberations resulted in disrupting habits and accepting change, questioning our own assumptions and our own power. We've learned that in interdisciplinary and collaboration discussion, this space was essential for us to find our own small ways of defiance, if you like, or liberation. We realized that our community of practice could be modeled potentially as a pedagogic practice, and not a model for the whole university to follow, but a small way of developing trust and community. And that's the key tenet. We've learned that reflective and interdisciplinary discussions enable difficult conversations, the conversation that makes us feel uncomfortable. It enabled that because we had many fights between ranks in our group, but we could resolve it because we were all committed to the process of decolonization with a common understanding of that it is not a taking away of the one and replacing it with another. So through our mutual learning, we were better able to empower our students with epistemological access, the big thing that is missing, and also academic belonging, because they became partners in the pedagogical process. We've learned that the communities of practice works best if we set aside time, the practical issues, if we have time to reflect, if we allow for agreements and disagreements, if we trust if we are patient, if we are tolerant, that we understand imperfections, different points of views, that we persevere, but it can also be a space to laugh, a space to share, a space to risk, but also a space to respectfully disagree. And then finally, we've learned that the communities of practice can contribute to decolonization if the students' life-work knowledges are also recognized and coexist with powerful knowledge. If students' life-work knowledge are represented in the curriculum, if the resources for equal participation in the curricular process if we take the effort of doing that, then we found that students get a sense of belonging, and that goes a long way to decolonize the decolonization process. I will leave it at that. That is what we've learned so far. I leave it open for questions.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, Jerome and Ruenda, for your presentations. I see that there are 2 comments in the chat already, but we'll get to that in a minute. Thanks, Pauline, for posting your comments. At this point in time, I'd like to hear from any of the other members of the group if they would like to add something before we delve into the Q&A session. I think that the examples that you offered us, Jerome, and that the group deliberated about, I'm hoping that that would give the participants, some insights into how we can give life to ubuntu pedagogy in our classrooms, but also how we can give life to phrases of social justice theory. So anyone that would like to add, even if it was from the experience the other day at the presentation with the Bath colleagues in the UK. Anyone, you're welcome. Becca?
Well, thanks, Anthea. First, I want to thank Ruenda and Jerome and all our colleagues for the work. I'm thinking of a presentation that Darren Bernard did, I think last week in the DLTE seminar, where she spoke of positionality. And that is also for us a shared point, I think, that starting from where we're at and being honestly reflective about our role in the place and the space of learning is a crucial part to enabling the discussions that then happen in an Ubuntu audience. So I think let's start by thanking Darren, and then I also want to remember the contribution from Professor Giocchino, who opened the SOTL of 2019 with a keynote speech about Ubuntu. And then in 2020, he did an Auxin about Ubuntu as well. And we picked up on that and went into studying Ubuntu articles by Wahid and others. We do have a lot of rich resources from SU scholars on Ubuntu and decolonizing and positionality.
Thank you. Thanks for that input, Gerda. Anyone else before I move on to Pauline's comments in the chat? Okay, let's start there. Dr. Pauline Hanako, if you mind opening your mic and then you can just speak to your comment in the chat, please.
Hi, Anthea. You putting me on the spot there.
You're welcome, Pauline.
Sorry, I was just having a nut there on the side that I quickly had to get rid of. There was 2 points that a lot of what you spoke about speaks to me, but there were 2 points especially. And the one was, can you hear me? Is it okay?
Yes.
Okay. It's the idea that decolonization should expand the curriculum and not narrow it down. I think a lot of people get very anxious when they hear the word decolonization. You're going to take away what I know about life, which of course doesn't mean that there shouldn't be changes in some of the things that we are teaching students. but it has to be expanded. I'm in a little bit of a different space than you are, where most of my students are teachers, in-service teachers, and what we try to do is to bring this over into their curriculum as well, that they are doing with their learners, which means that when we go to the Northern Cape or to Limpopo, we adapt our examples and the things that we do, and we have them bring in to us what is their context, what is happening around them. So not a single module that's presented is exactly the same in each province, because we have to cater for that. The basic concepts are the same, but the context around them are changed. And then the storytelling part also speaks a lot to me. Where this comes from, yeah, you can read what it says there, but this comes to me from was, I had a friend who was part of the Kudesa process, and he was a political researcher on the team. He's passed away, unfortunately, but yeah, he told us so many stories, and it was not the political stuff, it was the stories that people shared. When after a long day, he was the youngest on the team, and he was put up as a barman because of this, but that meant that he heard all the stories that came out that people could share and that could learn from each other after hours. And we spent hours around Bryce, where we just said, Rian, just start and just tell us. And yeah, it would just be so interesting, and not just interesting in a social way, but in learning from the other. And I think there's a thing that some people forget, is that we're all the other to someone else.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, establishing that interconnectedness and learning from the others through storytelling, that is indeed a powerful resource. And I think that when we at least try and do that, we are speaking to what Jerome termed the redistribution element of social justice, Fraser social justice theory, because that enables us to establish resources that we can draw on in getting to know the others. Yeah. Colleagues, please feel free to post your comments in the chat or to raise your hands if you would like to pose a question to any of the panel members. Yeah, what was also interesting for me is how this notion of interconnectedness and trying to establish that is so crucial for trying to do the work that we are doing. And I think that once we establish that sitting with the discomfort, that becomes easier. And that is such an important element for the work that we do. So really taking that ubuntu pedagogy heads on and trying to get to that point where we can sit with the discomfort. That is so important. Yeah, Jerome, you would like to add?
So I just want to add, we've used particular lenses, and of course we know every lens has shortcomings. We are not, I think I speak for the group, we're not prescribing that you use our lens. In your environment, you can use a different lens. The point is, though, that we operate in a more fractured world. We operate in a fractured educational environment. We are forced in a new liberal way of thinking and doing. We have to follow instructions, not question. But the student uprising in this country, for example, has shown us a reality. We are operating on the foot of the African continent. And hence, students want their voices to be included. They want to know that the education that they're receiving, they are part of it, that their cultures, their histories, their language is included in that process, and not only learn from let's say, a Eurocentric part. What we say, though, is that we're not discarding knowledge, because global knowledge is the sum of all knowledge. out of the African context, out of the Chinese context, the European context, that is global knowledge. And I think what we've learned through this process was that a process like this, or the decolonization part of it, broadens knowledge. It makes knowledge plural, and in that way we include more.
Yes, no, thanks so much, Jerome, for that. Doesn't take away, or like Pauline initially said, it doesn't narrow or decrease the pool, but it actually broadens the knowledge base. Colleagues, I'm wondering if there's anyone in the audience that would like to share any practical examples of how you have encountered the things that were referred to in the presentation, the social justice theory, and also ubuntu pedagogy in your contexts. We would love to hear from you. Is there anyone that would like to perhaps share? Maybe if I can start, I had the good privilege of doing a lecture observation not too long ago, last week, where I was amazed by how the lecturer actually drew the students into the whole formulation of the assessment activity, because she had them design the assessment. They were fully part of it, and it also involved peer assessment, where they could listen to one another and also give feedback to one another. And I was actually blown away. If I think back to the days when I attended university, that would be something so far-fetched way back then. So it shows to me that we have these pockets of really good practices and improvements, and those are the kinds of examples we should capitalize on. Those students were talking about things like ubuntu pedagogy. So that was really, really amazing. So if there's anyone else in the audience that would like to share, Jean?
Yeah, if there's no one else, can I share, because I don't have the device in front of me.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of everything that's been shared, what Pauline said, and Jerome, and you now, Anthea. For me, this is decolonization as praxis. So shifting from knowledge of decolonization, defining it for ourselves, and those definitions differ. And also what it is, what we can read, definitions and articles about it. And the shift comes with what Pauline was talking about and what Anthea was talking about now, to knowledge for decolonization. So we're taking that knowledge about decolonization, the different definitions, and we are actually practicing it in our classrooms by allowing our students to share and engage and bring about their knowledge in order to make decolonization happen. So for me, there's the knowledge of and the knowledge for making it possible.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks for sharing that, Jean. Fellow group members, I'm trying for the life of me to think back to the Bath presentation and what they shared with us. Just to give the colleagues in the audience some background, they wanted our experiences with this whole notion of decolonization and how we approach it at our institution, and at the same time they also shared from their side how they think about it, and they had very practical examples from their, and now I can't remember, what is that unit called?
Polis.
Polis. There we go. Thank you. From Polis, which was a combination of policy studies and languages and different colleagues, and they shared with us their examples of how they try and include students from different language backgrounds. And to me, it was interesting how that focuses their attention on what decolonization is about in their context. And it also just goes to show that it is, Jerome, what is the term that you always use? Pluriversalist. That nice term, yeah. Yeah, so I think these are all the kinds of things that we should keep in mind when we do our decolonization work. but their perspectives definitely was interesting. And yeah, I got the sense that they wanted to learn from us, as like Jerome said, us being at the southern tip of Africa. What is it that you're doing there? Is it about a whole African curriculum, perhaps? And I think they were amazed that our work is really theoretically based, and that we are prepared to also sit in the discomfort when we have our conversations. Okay, anyone else that'd like to raise a hand to pose a question? You are welcome to do so.
Well, maybe the one thing that I find interesting whenever we share the work with people who are colleagues in higher education is that, and it's the point of acts of rebellion that Jerome raised, is that a lot of what we've done has been that. It's not necessarily a mandate that any one of us received. Sometimes, I mean, I only realized like 2 years in, apparently I was supposed to ask my line manager if I could take time to do this. I was just happy to be part of it. And I think it's quite interesting that also seems to be the part that encourages and elicits the most curiosity, like how did we actually work together as an interdisciplinary community? Where did we find the time? And I think the big thing is we created the time and the outputs followed. We never set out saying we are going to write an article. We had 2 years worth of conversations until we got to the point where we thought there's something here and we can write it up. And that's maybe been, it's been very freeing for me to embrace that way of working. And that's what I take into the classroom as well. There are lots of things that I don't bother to ask permission for. I just do an experiment and learn with the students. And that seems to be the stuff that makes the most difference, not the long processes. Permission.
Maybe just a last comment from myself. I think whenever we hear the word decolonization, people freak out because they're immediately thinking it's a replacement of what we have, that whole debate. And people usually automatically run to excuses of why it can't be done. And people like to use uncontested ideas of how do I, unplanned problematic, how do I decolonize mathematics? And for me, those are just lazy arguments, because one don't know. I mean, we have a dearth of knowledge out there. We have a student community that is diverse. If we just take the effort to try and understand, and to take time to listen, to maybe just make a paradigm shift in our heads, things emerge. We've learned through this process, we've learned more from students than what we've perhaps learned from each other. And so there is, I think, the community of practice is but one example of how this is possible. And that is simply the statement that I think we're making. It is possible if we are willing to talk across boundaries, willing to sit and engage with each other and so on.
No, thank you. Thanks for that, Jerome. So can I put you on the spot? I'm just thinking about the discussion that we had this morning. And when we spoke about the obstacles in doing this kind of work, you mentioned something about where does the powerful knowledge actually lie? With who is it? If you mind expanding on that?
Yeah, I think perhaps I can just draw from what Ruenda was just saying about the space not being readily accessible, having to get permission, because I think that's what that's where we started to say, what are our challenges in doing this kind of work? And a lot of people, perhaps who later on ended up leaving the group, the conversation was more around the challenges. And it is the power that we do not have to do everything that we'd like to do. So I was saying earlier on this morning that if we also need to understand our spheres of influence when it comes to these conversations, so that we do not get frustrated or we feel like we are not doing enough. So it was enough for us, like you were saying, we started with just conversations. The idea was not to be here today and do this kind of work, but then the reading around this and the thinking together was that collective power or agency, if I can put it that way, where we can now, call an Auxin and present here as a group and support each other at the same time. So the power still lies in the university management, if perhaps I can identify some of the people, because there are still limitations, like you have shown. Policy does limit us, time does limit us, because there are tick boxes that we still need to tick. So those could be the challenges that you are facing, to say, I actually have a curriculum. I'm thinking now in the case of a newly appointed junior lecturer who also does see these challenges and who doesn't agree with this knowledge, but they are scared. And the whole issue about rebellion, where do they start? So those are the challenges that we also need to be mindful of, and that I think we actually initially had those conversations as a group as well.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing some. I don't know about you, but the chat has been awfully quiet this afternoon. Too much distraction, you say. But thank you. Adeline, I was actually thinking when I spoke about the translanguaging and the experiences we got to hear from the Bath colleagues, I was thinking of someone from the Language Center. So I'm so glad to see that you're putting your hand up. You're welcome to go ahead.
Thanks very much, Anthea, and thanks very much, colleagues. Actually, I'm so excited to see you doing this. I'm really sorry that I'm not there. But I was thinking the way that Sim is talking about like tick boxes and so on, we are really not wanting to go there. Actually, we don't want in any way to prescribe about language or anything else, or even about Ubuntu or so. But if a young colleague, a really optimistic, positive colleague would like to know what are the basic things I can change in my classroom without going overboard, just basic little things, what do you think we should tell them? As you can hear, I'm not in favor of tick boxes, but for the Language Center, for instance, allowing other languages during discussions, this can make a huge difference. So do you think there are other things like those, not in a tick box way, but in a way in which we can encourage people to start small and move towards Ubuntu?
Thank you for that question, Adeline. Anyone from the panel can respond.
South African case studies or African case studies, just have a look at your reading list. Try and make sure that that's diverse. That's where I normally start.
And the premise is always that people have agency, work within a structure, but even within the confinements of that structure, we have agency. And so to actively look for and invite different views, it's a brave move. We're not saying change the whole curriculum immediately, but you can do incremental changes over time. And so start slow, but have the willingness to first start on that journey.
I want to agree with Jerome, Adeline, when you said don't go overboard. I was going to say go overboard, you know, and then you look for the lifeboat to help pull you back on board. But if we are not going to be brave about going overboard and then go overboard with your ideas and then look for those realistic ways to bring it back. Because if you don't think far, you're always going to stay, remain within the confines. So use your agency, be brave, you know, create discomforting spaces and join groups, you know, look for those outlying groups. There are pockets of us at the institution because practically everything is academic now, and you can always bring it back to academics and then argue, but this is on board. So
It's always easier to ask for forgiveness than ask for permission.
there you go.
Then something else that were important to us in our journey was about the structure of the discipline. That's where we started with powerful knowledge. What is it in each discipline that is really powerful? And then the theory got us bothered because it retained power in a hierarchy of natural disciplines first. And it retained the power of those who know. But then when we worked with those authors who unpack and unravel power, we realized that if we can help students understand the story, the history, the structure, why does the discipline hang together this way? Why do we structure the first year of it in this way, and then the second, and then the third year? And also question it and be critical about it. Then we also make them powerful, and we make them agents of powerful knowledge.
And at the same time being inclusive of going about. Okay. Colleagues, thank you so very much. If there are no further questions in the chat, I would like to thank all of my colleagues present here in the room and all of you that have joined online. I'm now going to ask Sim to bring the session to a close for us. Some if you don't mind.
All right. No, thank you, colleagues online and in the room. Thank you, Anthea, for facilitating today's session. But I think in my closing, I would say I like what, I'm not sure if it was Jerome who was talking about keeping in the process of decolonization. It's about keeping the knowledge for and of, you know, at the center. I think that is the importance. So why is it important for you to know about it and for what? And I usually hear, you know, colleagues who, I was in a presentation and this lecturer at another university was presenting how they decolonize the space in the class. And she was saying it is, you know, saying the names of the students, you know, correctly. And, you know, it starts there when I don't know how to pronounce your name, but I learn with you and I'm able to be vulnerable enough to say, please teach me, you know, how to pronounce it. And that's where the conversations start. So we do not need to think very deep and too much about it. We can start where we are, and that's where Ubuntu comes in, and that's the whole practice. So yeah, I hope, you know, we have planted a seed and made you to start thinking. And if you are scared or think you are rebellious, I think we gave you permission to be. All right, colleagues, that's where we're going to end today's session. So in June, we are not going to have an Auxin. The next date will be the 23rd of July, and I will keep you posted on who is our next presenter and the topic. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, colleagues. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.
Dr. De Wet, I posted the link in the chat.
Thank you for joining us, Aiteli.
Bye. She's a coach.
I'm missing you guys, man. I'm missing you.
We miss you too.
Thank you for joining us.
Close.